Are we live? We ready to go? Tell me when.
You should have the microphone because this one is not worse.
All right. Microphone sound good? Hello, everyone. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the Digital Innovation Foundation, Digital Innovation Pavilion. I'm jet lagged. My name is Hillary Carter. I am the Senior Vice President of Research and Communications at the Linux Foundation, and it is an honor and a privilege to be here today to participate in COP28 and to have the opportunity with my esteemed colleagues to share with you the opportunity for open source to have an impact in meeting climate targets. I would like to thank our hosts at the Advancement of Innovative Approaches to Global Challenges, the IAAI Pavilion. And to those of you for tuning in, thank you very much for making time. Thank you for those of you joining us live in the audience. This presentation is brought to you by the Linux Foundation and a number of our project communities, OS Climate, LF Research, AgStack Foundation, Hyperledger Foundation, Linux Foundation Europe, FinTech and Open Source Foundation, the Sustainable, the SSIA, Sustainable Software Infrastructure Alliance, Project ELISA, and Project Zephyr. So, who will you be hearing from today? I will give an opening introduction, introducing the Linux Foundation, followed by my colleague Mai Trong from the SSIA, Sustainable and Scalable Infrastructure Alliance, Sherwood Moore, who's here with me, chair of the Hyperledger Climate Action and Accounting Special Interest Group from Hyperledger Foundation. We'll hear a welcome remark from Gabriele Columbro, who's our general manager at Linux Foundation Europe, as well as the executive director of our financial services vertical, the FinTech and Open Source Foundation. My colleague Kate Stewart sends her remarks. She's VP of Dependable and Embedded Systems for the Zephyr project and the ELISA project. Truman Siemens will give remarks from OS Climate, and we'll hear from Sumer Johal as well. So let's get started. I have the wonderful opportunity to describe the work very broadly that we're doing at the Linux Foundation. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we are a global nonprofit foundation founded in the year 2000, and we support open source projects all around the world. We are funded by a community of members. We have thousands and thousands of developers participating in our projects from all over the world. And we are comprised of more than 1,000 open source projects. And this is significant to our conversation here at COP28 because years ago in 2017, the UN Global Compact reported that digital technology and open source in particular would be instrumental in advancing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, while simultaneously unlocking 2.1 trillion in annual revenue for the technology sector. So open source and sustainable development and economic growth are all opportunities that are aligned and go hand in hand. Our projects, what we nurture and sustain, are fundamentally digital public goods. And they drive the digital economy, the software that we all rely on. And what's exciting is that this software has been applied in a way that is helping solve some of the world's most pressing challenges. And so why the Linux Foundation? Where do we fit in the big picture of open source software and its role in sustainable development? Essentially, we are a spectrum of collaboration. We are a foundation of foundations that support projects in open source software, open hardware, open standards, open data, open AI models, and open content. And so all of our efforts create a public good, a resource that is available to all. And it is our objective here this week to disseminate the fact that we exist. And we want people to get involved in our projects, to use our technologies, to accelerate our collective objective to meet the 2030 agenda. As I mentioned earlier, we are a global nonprofit. We host more than 1,000 unique projects, which I encourage you to discover. And dive in, get to know us. What we ourselves needed to understand was, when we look at the 1,000 projects under our umbrella, which were essential to meeting the 2030 agenda, and how were these projects creating an impact. We needed to understand the totality and the scope of how we were connected thematically in sustainability. And what we knew is that we had several project communities: AgStack, OS Climate, Hyperledger. Well, Hyperledger Foundation came about for different reasons, but many of our project communities, LF Energy is another example, were born with sustainability at their core. Many others, and I would say Hyperledger falls into this category, advance sustainability serendipitously. It is in the use cases and the applications of a technology stack that is really driving an agenda. But we had to do research to understand how were our projects aligned with different sustainable development goals. And we chose the SDGs as a framework to explore our own project portfolio because they are well known, because they capture the range of challenges that humanity faces. And many of our member organizations who provide working capital to our projects and to Linux Foundation are already aligned with the objectives of the SDGs. And so we commenced a study to understand how and in which ways our project communities were aligned with certain goals. And the two questions we asked were, does each project's open source asset help its users to make progress to one or more of the goals? And the second question was, does the project itself or its organization, by way of its community efforts, its special interest groups, its curators, its documentation around diversity, equity, inclusion, for example, did these efforts contribute to the goals, and in what ways? And the culmination of this investigative work was published in a report in September, Open Source for Sustainability: How Projects Under the Linux Foundation Are Helping to Accelerate the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So I invite you to scan the QR code, download the report, and explore how Linux Foundation projects are making an impact across the collaboration spectrum. One of the most exciting findings from this research effort was that all of our technical projects, each and every one, contribute to SDG 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Simply by reducing waste, by eliminating duplication of effort, time, energy, and so on, we create a layer of foundational software once. Each project is a starting point. There's no need to recreate a cloud container orchestration system. There's no need for a new operating system kernel. We have it, it's being used. And that fundamentally is the principle that applies across our projects. What we sustain is non-differentiated. It is the pre-competitive layer that every organization, be it government, enterprise, or the private innovator, can take advantage of and innovate with. So that was super exciting. We also learned that the applications, the use cases of our infrastructure were advancing individual goals. And I highlight 4 here: Zero Hunger, AgStack Foundation. Sumer is going to describe his work and his community's efforts to increase efficiencies in the agriculture sector, increase food yields, and so on. Clean water and sanitation. I point to the Hyperledger Foundation's collaboration with Fujitsu and botanical water technologies to reduce the use of water in the agricultural and production context. Goal 13, climate action. Truman is going to talk about the work of OS Climate and how its data commons and analytics tools are measuring risk and providing new opportunities to help the flow of investment capital and to mitigate a climate risk, physical risk, and so on. Goal 15, life on land. We were delighted to uncover the extent to which the Zephyr project and the embedded operating systems in that space are making an impact to monitor livestock, both caribou herds in northern Scandinavia, as well as protecting the white rhinoceros in Zimbabwe. So lots of exciting applications, and these are just 4 projects and examples of what the research report uncovered. Fundamentally, what we do at the Linux Foundation is create a framework for mass collaboration at scale. Collaboration around technologies, everything requires the inputs of people, and we encourage people to get involved. We provide structures, legal structures, sources of working capital, and teams who cultivate communities of practice. And we encourage you, your organizations, to join us and get involved. And this is what makes sustainable development possible. So please do contribute to our projects, learn through our numerous open resources, our research, our free training programs, our webinars, many, many online videos. We invite you to support, collaborate in any way you can, and become an advocate. And with that, I'm going to invite you to connect on email. The QR code points directly to my LinkedIn, and you can connect on Twitter as well. And now I'll play greetings from Mai Trong from the SSIA Sustainable and Scalable Infrastructure Initiative. We're going to do a volume check. We might go back.
What we live in will not be hospitable for future generations. Sustainability has become critically important to all levels of the digital ecosystem, starting at the base layers where the SSI Alliance has historically focused up through the software ecosystem. We're a unique project at the Linux Foundation, applying open source principles to the physical infrastructure powering today's digital public goods. At the base layer, we focus on efficient, reusable designs at the rack and server using a decoupled architecture. This architecture is named Open19 version 2, which accelerates the UN SDG number 9, building resilient and sustainable infrastructure for digital public goods. Physical infrastructure for the digital economy operates on a different time scale relative to software. We have collaboration with the creators of the digital economy to develop solutions that fit into the Open19 standard. We're spinning up projects to develop adjacent areas in the physical ecosystem. We'd love COP28 delegates to provide us input on high impact areas to focus on. We also need digital leaders that are deeply involved in the physical aspects of digital infrastructure and the communities they live in to collaborate with us on emerging projects. We also invite the emerging digital leaders to participate with us as we develop these open standards. You can find us at ssia.org.
Thank you, Mai. And now I'll call up Sherwood Moore to share his work at Hyperledger Foundation. Thanks, Sherwood.
Thank you, Hillary. I think that was one of the most eloquent descriptions of kind of Hyperledger and Linux Foundation and our work with the environment. So thank you for that. I particularly liked how you described the work that we do as a digital or a public good. And I was thinking about it. I kind of think it's more of a public asset because it's more action oriented and it's something that is not necessarily finished, but something that we all contribute to. So my name is Sherwood Moore. I am the chair of the Hyperledger Climate Action and Accounting Special Interest Group. We're building an open distributed climate accounting system. Next slide, please. Oh, right in front of me. Here we go, technology. There you go. So we are a collaborative network of technologists, environmentalists, policymakers, data scientists, Web3 evangelists, and other subject matter experts. We operate within Hyperledger, which is the distributed ledger technology open source environment under the Linux Foundation. And most of our work, all of our work is really focused on developing an open distributed climate accounting system to develop a shared ledger that the world can use. So we explore different solutions using OS, blockchain, AI, IoT, big data to create this open climate accounting system. And I've had this graphic here to kind of give you an idea of what we mean. Essentially, we're taking the real world of actors, mitigation actions, adaptation actions in finance, and we're bringing this into the digital world on a digital ledger, on a distributed ledger, actor IDs, domains, registries, digital records, all the different data of accounting of emissions and the different climate actions to mitigate them. So very briefly, I invite you all to join us. There are a couple different ways. We have bi-monthly presentations where we, due to the stature and the reputation of the Linux Foundation and Hyperledger and the reputation that the Climate Action Accounting Special Interest Group has developed over the years, we're able to bring in really top-notch technologists that are solving all aspects of the different challenges that are being faced in the climate accounting ecosystem. We have a carbon accounting and certification working group where they're actually developing solutions focused on an operating system for climate action, supply chain net emissions profiles, which distributed ledger technology is a perfect solution for developing that shared account across supply chains, investor climate disclosure, and obviously identity and digital credentials. And we also have a standards working group. Now they're working on the taxonomy, the ontology, the protocols, the standards in the real world, and figuring out how to bring that onto the ledger so that everything works together. We also have a research working group that has published several papers. So the end result is that you can be a technologist, you can be a subject matter expert. You don't have to have technical skill to contribute to our group. I have a really long link at the bottom there, but if you just search Climate Action and Accounting Special Interest Group, find our meetings, join us, say hi, and welcome to the club. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sherwood. Thank you for your kind remarks as well. Hyperledger was my segue into the Linux Foundation, so it holds a very soft spot in my heart. I spoke at Hyperledger Member Forum in 2018 and was then invited to join the Linux Foundation in 2021. So right back at you. And now I will be very pleased to play a welcome message from my colleague Gabriele Columbro from Linux Foundation Europe and the FinTech and Open Source Foundation.
Hi, everyone. I am Gabriele Columbro. I'm the Executive Director of FINOS, the FinTech Open Source Foundation, and General Manager of Linux Foundation. First and foremost, thank you for the opportunity to share with you what are we doing for sustainability, ESG, and more broadly, the 17 UN SDGs. I'll start with FINOS. FINOS brings together, on one hand, the largest financial institutions in the world, fintech companies, technology companies, individuals, and regulators to work on a new financial stack built on open source, open standard, and more broadly, open collaboration. And as every company becomes a fintech company, our work actively ensures that a highly siloed industry like financial services can start working much better collaboratively together on common pieces of non-differentiating infrastructure, and therefore reducing the overall effort, resources, and negative impact on some of these major world challenges. And of course, let's not forget ESG. Financial institutions, both on the buy side and the sell side, have a vested interest in managing and therefore reducing climate risk. This is why several of our projects really work towards providing harmonized models for ESG-related risk, carbon accounting, and ultimately transparent reporting to regulators. Case in point, our Open RegTech initiative is very much focused on mutualizing interpretation and implementation of regulatory requirements, but is increasingly inviting global regulators to collaborate transparently and hopefully in the near future produce machine-readable regulation, which will drastically reduce the barrier of entry to this market. Now, let's move to LF Europe. Over a year ago, we announced our European branch, and with my thick Italian accent, I've had the honor to be called to run Linux Foundation in Europe. And it became increasingly and absolutely clear that a lot of our projects could make an impact on some of the high priority that the EU and Europe in general has, and that are very aligned with some of the UN SDGs and sustainability work. So our role in LF Europe is absolutely to bring together, once again, the public sector and the private sector with the grassroots community that exists in Europe to truly advance progress and collaboration across the whole supply chain. LF Europe plays a key role in elevating and hopefully growing the impact of Linux Foundation projects like LF Energy, OS Climate, AgStack in the AgTech side of the house, as well as on everyday basis, we work to make sure that these projects can continue to grow, both through private funding, as well as working with the EU and other national governments to complement that with public funding. We think that some of the goals that Europe has are very aligned, again, with the broader mission of achieving the UN SDGs. And so we make impact and sustainability front and center when it comes to everyday work at LF Europe. The bottom line is, when you pair a world that is undergoing digital transformation in pretty much every industry, together with a power and exponential impact of a highly distributed and transparent and meritocratic model of open source, with a very worthy cause that any of the 17 SDGs and generally sustainability are, the impact that we can have is unimaginable. No individual institution, government, or individual per se can solve any of these pressing world challenges. But increasingly, together, we think open source can provide a vital chance to make a lasting impact and reverse the course of our world in many of these issues. And with that, thank you, and I hope to see you in our community.
Thank you, Gab. I will say, in my experience in working with many of our members who are based in Europe, the European leadership that I see is exemplary, certainly in the energy vertical. And really, these solutions are being created in Europe with the idea that they scale globally for the world and for everybody's benefit. So I really resonate with everything that Gab said, as I think many of us today here do. And I jumped ahead too far. And now I would like to welcome my colleague Sumer Johal from the AgStack Foundation to share a few words. Sumer.
Thank you, Hillary. And it's just a pleasure being here at COP28. So nice to meet all of you, and really appreciate the venue and the attention for this very, very important topic. So I'm going to talk a little bit about AgStack, which is Linux Foundation's project for food and agriculture. And broadly speaking, we are building a open source inspired and open source based open stack for both data, frameworks, models, and utilities that are required to essentially accelerate the both private sector and public sector action around climate as it intersects with our food and agriculture supply chains. So that's essentially what AgStack does. Let me just give you two or three, I'd like to do 2 or 3 key slides to kind of frame what we do, and would love for all of you to reach out and have a deeper dive with us if you're interested. So first thing that I'd like to say is that, we really can't talk about climate in a serious way without talking about agriculture. And that's really, really important to understand that agriculture accounts for 1/3 of our greenhouse gas emissions, from a planetary perspective. And, this is a slide from McKinsey that talks about sort of how that breaks out. But you can see that land use and agriculture production have the biggest, food-related greenhouse gas emissions. And that's really, really important to understand, because if we're really serious about climate, we cannot be non-serious about our food and agriculture systems. And today, those systems are really broken. The agriculture systems of the world are not sustainable. And that's because we were solving for different problems over the last few decades. We were solving for the Malthusian trap and making sure there was enough food for everybody. And I think that we generally succeeded in pushing the can down the road a little bit. But now we have other problems that were a result of that, and we need to really fix that. One of the key things that I want to mention here is that it's not about climate or food, it's climate and food. We need our planet and we need our food. We can't solve for the planet and run out of food and water. And so, the key here is that these two things are actually two sides of the same coin. They may even be one side of the same coin, depending on how you look at it. And the other thing that I want to mention here is that, we've changed before. We've seen this before with the ozone layer. We've seen this before with other planetary challenges, or even other non-planetary sort of societal challenges that we have faced, and we are able to change if we really muster. So it's definitely something that we can address collectively. The second point I wanted to make is that, while agriculture is a key source of greenhouse gas emissions, it can also be the solution. And this is actually what's really exciting. What's really exciting about the work we're doing at AgStack is we're trying to accelerate the digital transformation in our food systems. And doing so, as Gabriele was mentioning earlier, and before that, Hillary mentioned this sort of digital public good or digital public infrastructure, I like to call it. I like the digital public asset as well, mentioned. I thought that was really nice. So the idea is to use that kind of design framework thinking towards really improving our food systems. And if you look at the graph here, again, borrowed heavily from McKinsey, you can actually see that we are able to really make a dent in the climate and food intersection using what is colloquially known as AgTech. Okay, so AgTech is essentially a tech stack or tech that's used for agriculture. But if we design it properly, if we design the pre-competitive, Hillary did a great job of sort of mentioning the pre-competitive pieces of the stack that Linux Foundation does. Well, if we design the pre-competitive stack for agriculture in a way that accelerates precision, accelerates efficiency. Think about water. 70% of global water is used in agriculture. 70%. Half of the world's labor force works in agriculture. Let me repeat that. Half of the global workforce, global labor workforce, works in agriculture, improving their efficiency. Alternatives to protein are increasingly seeing the light of day and seeing markets. and having those be, alternatives. Conservation of everything: land, water, our biosphere, our bio ecosystems, and then of course regenerative farming, which is a big area of climate smart farming that is gaining a lot of attraction. These 5 areas, generally speaking, are areas that we at AgStack are pretty focused on as providing some tools, utilities, data, APIs, digital commons, AI. You think about a digital topic, we're addressing it at AgStack around these things with the goal of making AgTech be a climate tech kind of initiative. And the way I, again, want to sort of bring it full circle back to this notion of the digital public good, we like to think of AgStack as open source meets open science, and having that be the enabler. We had a partnership. We have a partnership with CGIAR, which is a global consortium of agriculture scientists, and their entire ecosystem of data sets and last 100 years of innovation we are putting together into the digital commons and data commons at AgStack as a starting point. And the reason is we want to build the digital road. The sort of metaphor today is used is that data is the new energy and applications are the new vehicles. Well, where's the road? If we can basically build a road in that metaphor with a digital public infrastructure, digital public asset, or digital public good, then all those problems of accessibility, particularly for the global South, cost and reusability. I think Hillary mentioned building it once so that people don't have to build it again and again. Again, if there's no road, you can still take your vehicle from one point to another, just not very fast or very easily. Maintainability, again, maintaining it once so everybody benefits. Interoperability. Today, there's lots of ag tech innovations happening. None of them talk to each other. With a common infrastructure, imagine multiple, vehicles going on the same road. And of course, trust, having neutrality, security, privacy. These are all very important issues that really, make this layer something private sector cannot do alone, because it's not about money. A lot of the stakeholders really have trouble imagining private sector alone with a vendor lock-in managing their data and privacy. What's the guarantee that that won't be used against them? And that's a lot of problems and challenges with the global South. A lot of governments are very concerned about that. So having a community-led infrastructure is really overcome some of that trust and neutrality. And of course, there's, research has shown over and over again that data and applications and software built with open source actually has a higher level of trust because the community is self-correcting. People actually see a lot of social peer pressure with their other colleagues when they're building software in open source. They don't want to just put some crap out because otherwise people will socially, put them down. So you end up with something really, really good. And I think that's what we need to solve our climate problems and challenges in the agriculture sector. And again, I wish to thank the Linux Foundation and all of you for giving the opportunity to present this. And please look us up. It's agstack.org. And please look us up if you'd like to contribute, if you'd like to interact, collaborate in any way. We welcome you, and we welcome you to our group. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sumer. And now I'd like to play a welcome message from my colleague Kate Stewart, VP Dependable Embedded Systems and Director of the Zephyr and Elisa projects.
Hi, my name's Kate Stewart, and I'm the VP for Dependable Embedded Systems at the Linux Foundation. And as part of that, I really focus on what we need to do to make open source dependable in embedded systems, literally. And two of the projects that I care about are Zephyr and the Elisa project, where I'm the director for them. And so these projects both contribute a lot towards sustainability and making things efficient over time. Why this matters to me for sustainable development is our population is growing and our resources aren't on this planet. We need to be more efficient with what we have, and we need to continue things need to start continuing to work better. We can't keep throwing things away. We need to keep things dependable and useful over longer periods of time. And so, we have to think about how we can make open source be maintainable, reliable, secure, and be able to be used in contexts that might have some safety critical implications associated with them. Basically, open source components need to be dependable, especially in constrained environments when it's very hard to do updates and remediation when there's issues. So both Linux and Zephyr have significant infrastructure already in place for power management, which is a large part of being efficient with your resources, for sustainability. And there's collaboration already on a global scale. So Elisa's looking at things like, okay, how do we work with safety in Linux? How can we go after in the aerospace sector? How can we go after in the medical devices? How do we do it for automotives? All of these, are areas that have safety implications. We need them to be dependable. Linux is 9 commits an hour. Zephyr's 2 commits an hour. So people are collaborating on a global scale and bringing their perspectives in. However, we do need to make sure that we can make these things happen in an efficient way so that the dependability becomes just baked into the system. And open source is accessible to everyone. The code is there, everyone can pick it up, and everyone can be innovative. And we're seeing more and more on the Zephyr project, at least we're seeing more and more things starting to emerge around the world. Linux is already there around the world, but we're seeing more and more stuff from Zephyr emerge. And so, everyone has a voice in these communities, and these different perspectives from a global organization do help make the project stronger. And so these are all factors that are coming in together to help us know what we've got and then make it safe and secure. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. One of the resource constrained environments that Kate was referring to is the example I mentioned earlier. Think of the constrained environment of a collar on the neck of a caribou in northern Scandinavia. No access to systems or networks readily, and so your IoT must be dependable and optimized. And same thing with rhinoceros in Zimbabwe. These are remote, constrained areas. And with that, I'd now like to introduce Truman Seaman, CEO of OS Climate. Truman, come on up.
Great. Thank you, Hillary. First, thanks to the Linux Foundation for this sponsorship that benefits all of our projects under the umbrella, and to our host Miroslav here in the IAI partnership that continues from working together last year. I'm glad that I'm kind of coming a little bit sort of toward the end of this set of presentations about the overview of what Linux Foundation engagement and impact on the SDGs is, and some of these particular projects, because we aim to be sort of at the tip of the spear of efforts in the open source community in bringing a range of different capabilities and interests across the tech sector to bear on, in particular, the problems of closing the gap in the $5-6 more trillion annual gap in financing that is needed to meet the goals of the climate convention, but to do it in a way that is consistent with and additive to, on the one hand, the goals of the Convention on Desertification, the Convention on Biodiversity, the range of different conventions and protocols within the SDGs, but also additionally that are financially sustainable. There is a very limited amount of public money in the world. You can't buy down the incremental cost of doing various things. You'll quickly run out. And one of the fundamental aspects of these digital public goods, of the pre-competitive layer, is to accelerate commercial solutions on the top, but also to be able to blend together and leverage those commercial innovations with additional public money, we've referred to this earlier, or philanthropic money to address particular public interest use cases. So in the case of OS Climate, we initially brought together large asset owners like pension funds and insurance companies, banks, and technology leaders, including, and you can't see in the room here, a representative from AWS, which has been one of our most important partners, and in fact is one of the most important partners for so much of what goes on at the Linux Foundation, because that's where the developers do their work on the S3 and the other resources there. We came together to solve particular business problems of, for example, pension funds that were that had said we want to commit to net zero emissions in our portfolios by 2050, but in the case of Allianz, one of our founding members, lacked the data, lacked the analytic tools needed to actually make their shorter term commitments and implement on those things. It took a great leap of faith, but part of that leap of faith was the understanding that tackling these complex problems is more than any one firm, Allianz, even more than the whole Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance, representing $10 trillion of investor assets, can do together. It needs to be solved jointly, and in a way that that meets the very rigorous criteria of a pension fund for its fiduciary responsibility. So the trust theme that you've heard throughout is a crucial reason why the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance is a member of OS Climate, why Allianz is a member, to make sure that there is the transparency to basically do the conversion from words of methodologies into math, into code, but in doing that, to have scientific validation of the math, challenge the assumptions, improve on them, and iterate and make that robust. In the case of another project, so Allianz leads our project for essentially scoring companies on what the implied temperature rise, 2 degrees, 1.5, 3 degrees of their operations and their commitments to reduce, and whether or not they are meeting those commitments. Second big project that is led by BNP Paribas is around physical risk and resilience. So being able to look at any latitude and longitude in the world and understand what the scenarios of risk are for chronic heat, for flood, for a range of different chronic and event-driven, and then to be able to say, okay, not only what are the assets at risk, high, medium, and low risk, to be able to figure out where you really need to drill down, but additionally, where are the most important interventions for adaptation and resilience that you need to invest in. So you can't make those decisions unless they are robustly identified on priorities for risk and risk management. So those were developed for the use cases of credit analysis and for loan origination, but with philanthropic funds, you can extend those public goods to be able to look at uses in agriculture, for example, understanding the chronic risks to agriculture in Nigeria through, for example, our Sustainable Africa Initiative-led work, and to be able to and to involve data scientists at a local level. We aim to be able to bring in additional technologies, IoT and Earth observation, to make that more robust, and then to identify the changes that are needed to address the food security needs of Nigeria and other countries in the future. And then the third project that we rolled out yesterday, going into a full global phase, that I want to mention is a transition scenario analysis platform that is where we have the very outrageous ambition to create the most effective tool for decisions in large-scale strategy and large-scale investments in the transition to a low-carbon, resilient, and just economy. But to do that, stepwise working in particular sectors to get more granular in those areas. So I invite you to look back on this channel that I has hosted for the presentation yesterday. That project is led by Capgemini, but we're very excited to deepen our collaboration with AWS, potentially with universities, including Harvard, on how we can really accelerate that work. Lastly, I'm just going give a nod to one of our colleagues who's not in the room and a vital member of the Linux Foundation, who you can see on the IBM streams from this. Vincent Caldera and Red Hat has been an essential partner to so many projects in the Linux Foundation, was there literally at the beginning because they convert the water of Linux into value, just the way Coke converts water into every kind of flavor and delivery mechanism. So they have developed the data mesh and data commons approach that's used in the OS climate community and is available to link up this whole range of different data all the way through to the applications and decisions that we're talking about. So we, like our colleagues here, invite those of you that are watching, those of you in the audience, to reach out to us to find out how we can be of service to your goals, to find out how you can get involved in our projects and work together toward this sustainable future together.
Thank you, Truman. And now it's time for questions. And Mira, I'm not sure how much time we have left in our hour, but we're open for any questions that may arise. 5? Oh, 12 minutes. Excellent. Okay. Yes.
Sure. Great. I'm Nelson Gonzalez. I'm from Amazon Web Services. This is an incredibly exciting conversation because I think you're collectively beginning to tee up this sort of middle space that is kind of undefined, where industry meets public asset. And I think you're teeing up some really tough questions that we're going to need to solve together. So I'm wondering, what is it going to take for to create incentives for companies like mine and our competitors, because we all need to do this, because I think there is a kind of impetus sometimes to try to recreate infrastructure. DG9 is really important to us in the name of public benefit, right? Obviously, that's incredibly inefficient, right? We built it, we've got it, it's best in the world, collectively. So how do you leverage what we've already built, not recreate the wheel, which is incredibly wasteful and insecure, right? And yet create a public asset in a way that is sustainable beyond philanthropy and beyond public dollars. Because at the end of the day, if it's not market sustainable, it's not sustainable for now, right, in the system that we have. So I think we're in this kind of liminal space where we're going to have to help each other articulate business models, articulate incentives. But what thoughts do you have about that? Because I get nervous sometimes that in the name of public benefit, there's just some potentially incredibly wasteful and potentially dangerous, right, development that's going on. And yet I completely get the fact that we need to hold it in the public's trust.
Who would like to answer first? Anybody? Sumaira, go for it. Switch to this one.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for the question. It's at the heart of what we do at Linux Foundation. So essentially, the first thing is, as Hillary mentioned, all of our projects are designed to enable the pre-competitive build once and then accelerate private sector usage of them to drive products and profits. And I call progress as well. Things like that. As an example of that, I also am the CEO of a company called Semios, which is a global leader in precision agriculture. And the reason why my role at Semios and my leadership at AgStack are not in conflict is because AgStack is actually very explicitly designing things that are in the best interest of private sector, including Semios. Not exclusively for Semios, but certainly in the direction of travel. And we do it very, very explicitly as a design principle. So let me give you more specific facts. So for example, one of our projects is the field carbon model project, which is a scientific collaboration with a whole bunch of universities towards figuring out what is the carbon flux measurement technique to measure carbon on a field level basis, on a field, agriculture field. There's lots of measurements at a ecosystem level, but for a field, if you have two agriculture fields, one of them is employing different agriculture practices than the other, how do you measure, scientifically independently that carbon flux? And if I'm at Amazon or Semios or any company that is in the private sector, and I have aspirations to create a carbon market, what do I need for building public trust that a model that I'm going to use to actually measure the carbon on a field is actually widely accepted by the scientific community, right? I actually can't do it by myself. I need the trust of the global consortium of kind of open source scientists and open data to come together, but it then enables me to take that open source project and build a commercial business on top if I so choose to do. And there are several companies that are moving in the direction of travel for that. Another project is MessageCast, which is a collaboration service where agriculture extension workers and farmers can actually collaborate, take pictures of pests and diseases, excuse me, and share with each other and tag, the experts, ag extension people can actually tag what they are. Exactly. And that expert tagging can actually be stored in a data commons, which we call AgNet. And it's like ImageNet, but for agriculture. And imagine if that happened at scale. There are, over 200 countries in the world that many have agriculture extension services. And imagine all these scientists using this with their farmers and creating a curated data set, which is anonymized, but actually expert tagged. Imagine what that could do for private sector who wanted to build AI on top of that for commercial products. They couldn't do it by themselves because the data commons just doesn't exist. So it's in the private sector's interest, all the private sector companies to compete, but not to build that lower level and then to compete on innovation products. And so that raises the bar for all of them. So I think for a company like Amazon, there are at least a dozen examples with an ag stack. And then there are, I'm sure, other examples across our projects. But let me repeat that. We are designing these projects, designing them to ensure and enable private sector to accelerate innovation as a design principle very explicitly. And that's what Linux has done all its DNA.
I'm going to do a quick guess that that we're also, maybe part of your question was around doing the same thing on multiple different clouds, or is that something that you want to get into?
That's very relevant. I think what's more relevant is I'm wondering, what do you build once? And when you say build, I completely get the standards, interoperability, ontologies, et cetera, 100%. But when we say build, we literally mean like data centers, right? And IoT devices and the analytics around that. And if you mean that, and I spent most of my life in philanthropy, so I say this with affection and respect, that's not the best role, right, of philanthropy, to build anything, frankly, unless it's the conceptual, not about to actually build the things. That's my question. And sure, I think the multi-cloud, the multi-cloud question is largely solved because we have to do that every day, right? Because we just have to. But again, I think incentives, perhaps Global South, more public benefit use cases that aren't philanthropy is a puzzle that we can solve.
Just before we continue to answer, I just want to make sure if there are any other questions that we want to cover. Okay, so let's get the questions out and then we'll chop it up.
You can always chop.
Yeah, and it is actually, I think, related. So my name is Francesca Dominici. I'm the director of data science at Harvard and professor of data science. And so it's a similar question to Nelson with respect to the incentive, right? So I love your model, and I'm just thinking, in any of these major academic institutions, we have thousands of students developing open source code to solve really important problem, from artificial intelligence to, look at satellite images to causal inference modeling. I can go on and on and on, right? I don't need to tell you that. But their incentive, right? And also you should know that in any data science program at Harvard, but true at Stanford, we now force them, they has to be writing their code in open source and put everything on GitHub, right? That is a requirement for graduation, something that we are very proud. But now so I think the opportunity is huge, right? Because you can harvest the amount of knowledge. But their incentive is that they're going to put it on their GitHub. They're going to put a link on their CV, right? And they're going to publish. And after that, it's it. So have you thought how we incentivize this enormous community of scholars from master student, postdoctoral fellow, PhD, and faculty? They're solving problem in open source. It could potentially be like, a flooding of important software, but how we incentivize them to be in touch with you.
Hillary?
To be in touch with the Linux Foundation? Yeah, I think there's an immense sense of community when you're involved in something that is bigger than yourself. And when we see our projects having impact and when we see the opportunities to make a difference in the world, the intrinsic motivation to collaborate is something that's very difficult to measure, but it's real. It exists. And this is part of the reason why we're here, is to describe that there's a community that needs people, that we are all in this together, that only together by innovating as a community are we going to solve problems. The other side of incentives that I see it is to innovate in a way that follows the money, so that our projects are sustainable unto themselves, that green won't scale. Green tax doesn't scale. But when we create markets for green solutions, when we incentivize people economically to change their behavior, or we create economies through these innovations, those are the projects that have a life. And it's to think, unfortunately, sometimes in economic terms, about our economy and how things survive.
Yeah, I'll just say, I think one thing when you think about the Linux Foundation or Hyperledger, it's not really a separate entity from your entity. It's because it's open source. I think you can kind of think of it as the safe place, the shared sandbox that you can come with your competitors to figure out how to build that foundational layer before you start building your individual spires, right? So I always toss the question back to you from a strategic perspective. How can you use Linux Foundation and Hyperledger as part of your strategy when you're building for this particularly sticky challenge? And how can you keep it top of mind for those foundational pieces in all the conversations that you have?
I'm going to come back to Francesca.
Oh, okay. No, this is actually answering Francesca's question. So I would fully agree with both my colleagues here, but let me just add a couple. I have a son who's 21 and he's in college, and I encourage him to do open source, and he asks me why, right? So I would give sort of three very tangible, again, I'm fully agreeing with what they're saying. In fact, that's the real reasons why one should do it. And often people do, but there are sort of very tangible things as well. So the first is that if you're a contributor to a project that starts to build its community, which is measurable. You can measure community by, you heard Kate talking about number of commits per hour. You can measure community by how many people are actually using it, how many people downloaded the software from GitHub, for example. And so if your contribution into open source starts to build a community around it, it has professional acclaim in the eyes of employers. And that's a very tangible thing I'm telling my son. So it's, it's real for me. The second thing that I think happens is that when I mentioned it in my talk, that when you build software for a peer review process, which inherently is what open source is, because you're making your software open for your peers to critique and improve on, you become a better developer. So actually you learn about data science. Let's say there are some techniques that someone can improve upon your algorithm, and you just become better. And so I think that the first time you do it, it's a little scary, but once you get used to it, you start to really see like, oh, wow, I can actually learn 10 times faster when I'm collaborating with others, and my knowledge base grows with all the latest products and techniques and tools. So second is just improving your own quality of craft, if you will. And I think the third piece is entrepreneurship. I think a lot of contributions into open source start as what I would call open core products, where the inside core of the product is open, and then you build a proprietary layer. This also addresses the question from Nelson about how these are designed for private sector. So if the students aspire to become entrepreneurs or they want to be part of an entrepreneurial company, that also helps their direction of travel from the career perspective. So those are very tangible 3 key things that I would think would incentivize students. Yeah.
Because I think I didn't express myself for the question correctly. I think that we have overcome the challenges of convincing the student to write open source software. I think this is happening, which is great news. I think what I was asking is, how do we incentivize the student and faculty that are already putting things open source to contribute to what you are doing?
Okay, so that's great. And so
So it's actually an easier problem.
so I mean, so one of the, I'm going to actually kind of also put this a bit back to you, to the people that are watching this, but also to set a challenge for ourselves in the Linux Foundation, so there are, I mean, probably if you were to just to take this point in time, there are probably, 1,000 open issues that are related and will incrementally have a sustainability impact at this moment. Issue is like a next problem to be solved in one of these projects where a student or a faculty member could jump in and make a difference. 100%. But we need to make it clear, oh, they're in this SDG, that SDG, and be able to get them to the project where they can start and jump in and start to contribute. But also, part of the incentive is, the pull is, so if we can make clear, okay, this is the where we are going in this project and how it is going to change the lives of people and communities and the sectors and things that you care about. And that's one of the reasons why you should do it. And by the way, these companies that are watching this project are hiring young data scientists and developers who excel in this area. Then, it's a doing good and doing well opportunity.
I will emphasize Sumaira's point and Truman's point about recruiting from our open source repos. A lot of young people are excited to join a working group and simply have that on their CV and show up and network. And this is the opportunity that really exists for students. And I encourage them to follow their passion. And we are here to answer those questions about which SDGs perhaps their projects are aligned with, but they must contribute to the most meaningful industry vertical projects or technology domains that really speak to them. Because you can't force quantum on anybody, but if you're interested in AI, join the AI projects. If you're interested in blockchain, get involved in the Hyperledger project and so on.
Hello, I'm Walid Abu Saifan. I come from Beirut, actually, where open source makes a real difference and saves lives. So So this is one thing to your point. So other than my role now as in a civil society organization, I've been an activist and I did computer science since 2001. I literally witnessed the open source movement in general and the software, open source software, saving lives, saving mothers, babies, educating. We literally depend on those in the spaces where we don't have funding. So projects like Moodle, like ODK, like Drupal, like different systems, even clinics, etc. Literally, I think you can visualize those to the students, and as they said, the projects that they identify with. And I think in a certain communication way, since those projects are fairly, starting, you can establish a channel for them to have the gratification and the feedback from the ground, because literally those things, open source, Debian, Red Hat, have been saving lives. So in every moment, and right now, with the conflict that is ongoing, we are deploying relief mechanisms that depend on open source software and infrastructure. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, so I think you couldn't have said it better. I think our mission of communicating the opportunity and you kind of putting the challenge to us, how we can get and really engage is clear. That's why we're here. That's why we're going to be back here and bring more of our colleagues from other projects. And I think we've already learned a great deal together about how we can be opening up and engaging more in the months ahead. So, do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, I will, and I will thank you all. And my final ask is if you will join us in sharing the opportunity for people to get involved, and please evangelize what you've learned today. Download the sustainability report. That's a very quick way to see the landscape of opportunities for sustainable projects hosted by the Linux Foundation. And we invite everybody to connect with us. And thank you all so very much for your time. It's been an honor and a privilege. And thanks to the Digital Innovation Pavilion and Miro. Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
We're Jaybird. I'm tired. I'm not at the airport. Yeah. No.